Season 1 of She-Hulk is finally over, and I do mean finally, because this is honestly some of the most painful drivel I ever had the misfortune to endure. To be clear, it is not the worst Marvel content I ever watched. I was, after all, able to finish watching this, something I wasn't for the Inhumans, but it is certainly somewhere in the rock bottom 3. And were I not reviewing it for all of you watching, I would never have wasted my time on this. I do regret having to say that about She-Hulk, because she is a legacy character. At their best, her comics are great, and that is what this series could and should have been. Longtime watchers will recall that I was actually excited and optimistic for this going in. As it turned out, I had no reason to be, and that is depressing. Let's see why. In this video, I'll begin with sharing my thoughts on what has got to be one of the worst season finales ever made. What could possibly have compelled the writers to do this? And finally, where this series leaves the MCU going forward. The plot for the finale leaked online the day before the premiere, and it contained nuggets like that Jen would be wearing one of those inhibitors we were told by Bruce Banner himself would not work on her. Hulk would show up and he and the Abomination would fight, then Jen would scream to the camera, "Enough with this shit, crawl out of your Disney Plus app and into the behind the scenes thing, ask what the hell the writers were doing, planning all of season 2 to be a Super Mario 2 style dream, and then go straight to Kevin, the robot with the plan."
Oh, how very interesting.
To demand a new ending, because Lord knows Kevin can't be a man, as all men are trash. As I was reading this leak, which again dropped the day before the release, my first thought was, there is no way this can be real. My second thought was that based on what we've seen the writers do so far, it just as well might be, and lo and behold, it was. I'm not going to go through the details of what played out on screen, as I'd be losing too many IQ points if I did. Instead, let's just go through the series' overall theme and message, which was hit home in the final episode. Jen is a woman struggling in a man's world, where evil toxic men gatekeep and would presume to tell her how to live her own best life, how to further her career, and even how to tell her own story. She-Hulk is about breaking free, taking that control back, deciding how to live her own best life, to change the narrative, and to tell her truth. This being the overall theme gives some more accidental insights into the warped and distorted worldview of these writers. These writers must all have been in therapy at one point or other. This is clear from the therapy theme that is going on. If that messed them up worse, or if they need more of it, I don't know, but to me, the whole series kind of seems like a cry for help. Because based on what is on screen, the writers appears to have some warped perception of reality. After last week's episode, I wasn't sure if they had tacitly referenced our good friend Doomcock or if it was one big coincidence. Do check out our discussion with him if you haven't seen that already, link is in the description. But after the finale, I lean more towards the possibility that yeah, that probably was a deliberate dig at Doomcock. It would appear that in addition to the overt misandry and sheer hatred of all men, these writers also harbor a hatred of Marvel's fanbase. Certainly the parts of that fandom which has a visible presence on platforms like YouTube. However, the on-screen representation of this part of fandom is not reflective of how it actually is, but rather as the woman in the She-Hulk writers' room perceive it to be. The emphasis here is on perception, and their perception is indicative of them being in an echo chamber where groupthink rules and all touch with reality is lost. These writers appear to be, and I hate to use the term but I can think of no better, delusional, and they've imbued the series with a hatred of both men and Marvel's built-in audience. Then you gotta wonder, who is this series made for? She-Hulk is clearly not made for the fans of the She-Hulk comics, because they hate the readers of that, the vast majority of whom are male. And it's also not made for the wide audiences that loves the MCU, a slight majority of whom are also male. So is it for the female MCU fans then? Well, not all of them, that's for certain. It looks to me as though this series is by and for coastal city millennial women that hate men, and that consistently go with the worst possible men in the dating market.
Is that like a personal attack or something? Or is that a request? Do you think I should?
That appears to be who this series is made for, because that is certainly who Jen breaks the fourth wall to speak to. So, coastal city millennial women that hate men is the target group that Marvel Studios, with both Victoria Alonso and Kevin Feige's blessing, chose to dedicate almost 5 hours worth of screen time towards, and at the expense of everyone else. Because like so many other things trying to be inclusive, She-Hulk is in reality exclusionary. It appeals strictly to one little niche only and no one outside of it. That's not going to be good for the audience perception of the MCU. Every successful brand will have the odd misfire, but Marvel's problem is that ever since Endgame, they've had nothing but misfires, with Spider-Man No Way Home being the one notable theatrical exception to that. On Disney Plus, however, there have been no real exceptions. The closest thing to it, ironically, is Ms. Marvel. But overall, Marvel on Disney Plus and Phase 4 at large has been, as we say in my neck of the woods, one long chapter of sorrow. So in the end, what did She-Hulk contribute to the MCU? Well, based on the viewing number measures we do have, further erosion of fan interest, as well as a further overstuffing of the Marvel continuity, making it more difficult for general audiences to keep track, and therefore to retain interest. I mean, next time Hulk shows up on screen, I'm sure more than a few will wonder how his arm suddenly healed and why he all of a sudden has a barbarian off-world son. Now, I will give some credit where credit is due. Towards the very end, She-Hulk did address the sometimes formulaic nature of Marvel movies and the need to change up the Marvel formula, and I concede that point, but not the ham-fisted manner in which it was done. If I have to choose between formulaic and what was done in this series, I'll stick with the formula all the way. Because in order to deviate from it, you have to be better than it, and that is something She-Hulk most decidedly was not. That is a shame. I wanted to like this series, but it came out worse than I imagined it ever could, even in my worst nightmares. If you liked it, cool, I'm glad you did. There's no accounting for taste. But my only hope at this stage is that to Marvel, this will be a powerful lesson in what not to do, and that they will take this as a sign that they need to change the course they are on. Right now, that is the only positive outcome She-Hulk could possibly have on the MCU. Let me know your thoughts on She-Hulk in the comments.